Hello, everybody. Shavua Tov. We are going to look at one pasuk tonight, one verse from the Song of the Sea, from Shirat Hayam. Today was Shabbat Shirah, the Shabbat of Song, and it's worthwhile taking a moment and talking about the power of song and the power of joy. When was the last time you sang a song, by the way? Like, just out of joy? I want you to think about that as we start our learning together. So this is our verse. This is what we're going to be talking about. Az yashir Moshe uvnei Yisrael et hashira hazot ladonai. At the crossing of the sea, we have this verse, Exodus 15, verse 1. Thus Moses and the children of Israel sang this song to God, Vayamru Lemor, and they said as follows. It seems like it translates pretty clearly, but it actually doesn't. The verse is a little weird. We'll talk about exactly why the Hebrew is kind of strange. Az yashir Moshe uvnei Yisrael tashira hazot ladonai. Let's jump into it. And through our learning, we'll explore how the Hebrew offers so many different kinds of interpretations. So here's, we're going to look at 4 short interpretations of this verse. And the first is this, from the Kedushat Levi, of course. So yesh lahavin ha'ikar simcha hu balev. So the Kedushat Levi starts, he says, we should understand that the essence of joy, it is in our heart. Imken, and if so, matzorech ledaber v'lashir ba'et simcha. What's the need to speak and to sing at the moment of joy? It's a reasonable question. Joy is internal. What is the need to take that internal joy and to externalize it? You almost lose something when you take that internal feeling and you put a word on it. Yochev Shavua Tov, Shalom. That's his question. So what's the need to sing if there's joy? And speak, by the way. And the matter is this. That is to say, when one feels joy in their heart, it has a tendency to go away in a moment or two. That is to say, when we feel internal joy, it's fleeting. Even though it's powerful and it's raw and it's real, when we feel it inside, it has the tendency to pass by pretty quickly. Aval, he says, when one speaks words at the moment of their joy, the joy expands more and more. At the crossing of the sea, the children of Israel wanted to expand their joy and to remain with God even longer. Shalola hafsik, they didn't want it to stop. They were so joyful, they didn't want that joy to leave. Thus they took, literally what he's saying here is that they entered to the gate of speech, which is to say they took their joy and they put words to it. Even though it diminished it a little bit, because you take something internal that is even beyond words, if you give it words, you diminish it a little bit, but you expand the amount of time that it can exist in the world, he says. And they did this in order to expand the pleasure they would get from it. And this is the first explanation of the pasuk. Az yashir Moshe, thus Moses sang Vayomru Lemor. And Vayomru Lemor, these 2 words, are colloquially translated as, and they spoke saying. But what's going to be important here is Lemor is an infinitive. It means to speak. In Torah, colloquially, we would translate this as, and they spoke saying. But he says, let's look at it just in its literal sense, and I'll show you what he means. Ratzelomar, that is to say, Sha'amru dibarim bichnei lemor yoter ve'yoter. They spoke words in order to speak more and more. Vizulat zeh, and he says, without this understanding of lemor, looking at it just in its basic infinitive here, he says, you can't understand it if, without that basic understanding. The hakulam amru v'ha'ech shayach kan lomar la'acherim. How could it be that they were telling other people to speak? Vayomru le'mor, he says, must mean, and they spoke to speak. What was the reason that they spoke, that they sung anything? Vayomru le'mor, and they did so just in order to speak. They needed words. They needed something in order to expand their joy. So it didn't, even though they were feeling it in their heart, they wanted to experience it more. Hello, David Seltzer. I'm so glad you're here tonight. That's fun. Bruno, Shavua Tov, everybody. So the first understanding of this pasuk, Vayomru le'mor, and they sang this song in order to speak, which is to say that speech, it's kind of twofold. You have two sides of this coin. On the one hand, there's the fact that speech, when you take a feeling and you put words to it, somehow it's a little less than it was. Think about love. If you love somebody, how could you possibly tell them how much you love them? We say in the morning, Ilu finu male shira kayam. Even we say to God on Shabbat morning, we say, even if even if our legs could run as fast as antelope's legs, even if our mouths are as wide as the oceans, we couldn't possibly thank you enough. Words don't have the power to capture an internal feeling, but the other side of the coin is they do have the power to bring that feeling into the world, and in doing so, expand its existence a little more. So the first understanding is, in this case, there's a deep joy that Israel felt at the crossing of the sea, and they wanted to stay with it. They wanted to keep God around a little longer and keep that joy around a little longer. Okay, that's number one, Az Yashir Moshe. We're going to look at another explanation of this. He says, O Yomar, al derech shebe'arnu b'makom acher, says, or perhaps it's like this, she'ikar hata'anu b'hasimcha, hu shezachinu la'avod et borenu. The essence of our joy, he says, perhaps it's this. The essence of our joy is that we merit to serve our Creator. We merit to serve God. Borei olamot elyonim b'tachtonim ad ein ketz, the Creator of upper worlds and lower worlds to no end. V'ho ha'olamot ovdim oto, and all of God's worlds, all of creation serves God. Seraphim v'chayot v'ofanim, these celestial beings, these angels, afal pichem, even though God has created all these worlds, even though God has created these worlds of angels, we believe, through our prophets, through Kabbalah, we have, a belief in a sense that God has made worlds which we don't have access to. Even so, Yaakov bachar lo ya, God chose Israel to serve God. Shiyu ovdim oto. V'nimtza sheha'avoda she'anu ovdim et borenu, and we find that service which we do for our Creator, hi atzma ta'anu gadol lanu, it itself is a deep joy to us. V'zehu, and so this is the second understanding of the verse tonight. Az yashir Moshe uvnei Yisrael. Israel, thus Moses and Israel sang, u'mefaresh hamikra, and the Torah explains ma haya shiratam v'simchatam, what was their song about, what was their joy about. Ba'amar, and it says et hashira hazot ladonai, this song to God. Perush, in the explanation here, he says, Al shezachu le'mor shira lifnei hamakom, just the fact that they merited to say this song before God. V'zehu v'yomru le'mor, and this is what we mean by the second part, Vayomru lemor, and they said these words, Ratzel Omar, that is to say, Shekol Amiratam Haya al Shezachu lemor. All of their words, all of their joy were based on the idea that they merited just in the first place to say them. The second understanding is that this song was not just because they were free from Egypt, not just because they were experiencing this miracle, but because they merited to just serve God. The fact that they had the joy to sing to God was enough for them. We often look for meaning, personal meaning in the tefillot, in prayer, in mitzvot. How can I feel something while I'm keeping these commandments? Well, this is a tool. That is to say, if in the receiving of the Ten Commandments, the response from Israel is not a seven nishma. We will do it and we will listen, which is to say there are some mitzvot that we do, and it takes months, years to really understand it and to feel it. But if you don't, you can hold in your heart just the fact that you're alive to serve God. That itself is joy. That itself is joy. The fact that we are still here, even if the essence of a prayer we don't understand, even if the reason behind a mitzvah eludes us, because we're just here and we've merited the health and the well-being to just be able to serve God, to praise God, to pray, to do a mitzvah, that enough is joy. And he says that's the second understanding of this verse. The fact that et hashira hazot ladonai, that word, and they sang this song to God. The fact that it was to God was the essence of the joy. David, I see you wrote that the intimate relationship between song and prayer is expressed by the fact that shirah and tefillah share the same gematria. Cool! That's a great fact. Gematria is the numerical value of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and shirah and tefillah have the same numerical value. That's fantastic. Thank you, David. Yes, shirah and tefillah, both ways to serve and connect to God. I love it. Thank you so much for that gem. Thank you, David. Okay, count them. That's two understandings of this verse. We're going to look at another one. Oyavor, or perhaps it's this. Az yashir Moshe uvnei Yisrael. So this understanding, he's going to go back to an idea from the Baal Shem Tov. So the Baal Shem Tov was the very first rabbi of the Hasidic movement, year 1700. The Kedusha Levi is roughly 1780-ish. You can kind of place him there in the late 18th century. So when he quotes the Baal Shem Tov, that's who we're talking about here, the very first rabbi who created this Hasidic movement. He says, Oyavoar, or perhaps, Az yashir Moshe of Bnei Israel, et hashir hazot ladonai, thus Moses and the children of Israel sang this song to God, Lahavin halashon she'amar yashir. And we have to understand the language here of yashir, this word yashir, velo amar shar. It doesn't say shar. It says yashir. So what's the difference? Yashir it's not in the past tense. Shar would have been thus Moses and Israel sang this song. But yashir appears to be in the future tense. Thus Moses and Israel sang. But yashir also can be in the he feels. So for my Hebrew grammarians out there, yashir can, even though we don't really use this word so much, it could mean to cause to sing. So this is how he's going to understand it. Nireh Farish. We'll explain it like this. Bezrat Hashem, he adds, with the help of God. Dehine habal Shem Tov amar perush hapasu. The Baal Shem Tov explained this particular verse in Psalm 121, verse 5. Adonai tzilcha, that God is your shadow. Shehashem yitzbarach, Baruch Hu, that God mitnaheg im ha'adam gam ken kamo hatzel, that God acts toward a person like a shadow. This is an idea we've talked about before, and I think a very deep one in the Hasidic understanding of how God and humans relate. He says that the Baal Shem Tov teaches that God acts towards people like a shadow. Shekol ma shehadam oseh, that which the person does, gam hatzel oseh, also so does the shadow. Ken habore baruch hu mitnaheg im ha'adam gam ken kamo shehu oseh. Thus, God acts towards a person in the way that a shadow does. If you bring kindness into the world, well, guess what? God brings kindness into the world, into your world. If you go out and you're mean and you're focused on your ego, well, guess what? That's how God will act. This is a very deep idea that if you, that is, they be the deity you want to worship. Does that make sense? Instead of be the change in the world. If you want a God that's kind, if you want to believe in that God, then you yourself have to go out and be kind. And that, in turn, will help you experience God in that particular way. Beninsan, so he's going to take that idea and he's going to expand it to this verse. And then Yochel will translate your comment in a second. Yisrael amru hashira b'shat geulat Mitzrayim. When Israel said this particular song at the moment of the Exodus from Egypt, Azai haya hakadosh baruch hu gam ken shar. God also sang, kivyachol, so to speak, et hashira hazot, this particular song. V'hine yashir, and so this word yashir, Lashon yaf ilhu, it's a causative verb, he says. V'chen perush hapasuk az yashir. Thus, the explanation of this verse, yashir, klomar, this is to say, Yisrael pa'alu b'shiratam, et hashir hazot ladonai, that Israel caused with their singing this particular song to God. Klomar, that is to say, shehakadosh baruch hu kivyachol, that God, so to speak, Gam ken yashir tashira hazo, was also singing this song. Vayomru le'mor, shahayu omrim, sheyomru Hashem yitbarach, Gam ken tashira. That they said, when they said this song, also God did too. So the yashir here, we can understand it as a causative. That is to say, going back to this idea that Hashem tzilcha, that God is your shadow, and the Baal Shem Tov's idea that God acts toward us the way we act in the world. When Israel sang the song Yashir, they caused God to sing too. When they exploded with joy, also God did. And so that's the power of this song, of this particular song. That's the power of putting joy out in the world, is also then you're creating joy for God. If you want to be close to a God that finds joy in your prayers, that finds joy in your mitzvot, then so too you need to express that joy. So that's the second idea of Yashir, is that when they sing the song, also God sang the song. So as Yashir, remember, we're looking at, I told you in the beginning that the Hebrew in this verse is can be translated in multiple ways. And so again, Yashir, we said, it could be causative, could be future. And so we've given a few different ideas so far. And then Yochel, you said, it's amazing how words cannot express feelings, how to comprehensively translate the strength of joy. Really, the word loses nikud and at the same time gives life. And then you say good words bring goodness to the world. Big is our responsibility. I wonder if that was the translation difference between Portuguese and English. But yes, good words bring goodness into the world. I love that. So we're talking about words here. I think that's really important, Yochel. It's a good reminder that we're not just talking about feelings. we're talking about expressing joy. So here, the words we speak, have more of the stuff of creation than just our feelings. And um, when we express it, then it gives God the power to also create joy in the world. And your last comment was great emotion to remember that God sang along. Yeah, joy that transcended truth. It's necessary to bring joy in all actions. Yes, and joy, I just want to let you know, in the Hasidic tradition, joy is so critical. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha. This verse from Psalms, serve God with joy. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha is taken to be, akin to a commandment in the Hasidic tradition. If there is not joy in your worship, then you haven't done the mitzvah to its fullest extent. And Rosalie, thank you for that great reminder. The Shehechianu helps to expand our joy when we focus on the beauty of a new moment. Thank you. Okay, last explanation of this verse. Az Yevoar, Az Yashir Moshe. Thus Moses and Israel saying, Ki haklal ze pasuk mermez gam al atid. So this verse also hints at the future. Remember, Yashir, the Hebrew word itself can be causative, but it can also be in the future. Thus Moses and Israel will sing. So he gives this great alternative understanding here of how this can make sense if this is a future word. So he says, if this word is in the future tense. Thus, we explain with the words of our rabbis, Zichronam Livracham, Hanireh al-pi perush ha-pasuk. He says, regarding this pasuk, from Psalm 68, verse 28, there's a pasuk there about Sari Yehuda, Sari Binyamin, about the princes of Judah, the princes of Benjamin. But without going too deep into that pasuk, I'm going to jump to the end of his comment, which is this. There's a story where Nachshon ben Aminadav, the prince of Judah, was the first one to enter the sea. When Moses was busy praying to God, when the Israelites were busy freaking out that the Egyptians were chasing them from behind and they were stuck at the sea, Nachshon ben Aminadav, we learn in a midrash, had the faith to jump into the water and to walk forward. And if you look at Psalm 69, you see the first verse is Ki ba'u mayim ad nafesh, that when the water came to my soul. It's a psalm that's attributed to Nachshon ben Aminadav about the fear of that moment, walking into the sea, and also the faith that he had. So when Moses was busy praying, the Israelites were busy freaking out. We have this midrash that Nachshon ben Aminadav had the faith to walk into the sea, and it was only after he walked into the sea that God saw his faith, that the Israelites were inspired by his actions, and the sea parted. So that's what he's going to talk about here. Kizeh sheba'u shevet Yehuda techila bayam. This fact, which the tribe of Judah went first into the sea, ayadeze yomru shira. Because of this, they sang a song. What do we mean? V'nimtza b'tchila k'shenichnasu lahayam. And we see it at first when they entered the sea. Hayam behem ze hamachshava. It was in their mind. It was in the mind of Nachshon ben Aminadav, of this prince from the tribe of Judah, Shebivadai Hashem yivka hayam, that God will certainly part this sea. God will absolutely perform a miracle. I'm going to walk in the sea with full faith that God is going to part it and bring me to dry land. That's what he's saying Nachshon ben Aminadav had in mind. V'yomru shira, and they said this song. So this is how he understands it. Zehu haremez az yashir. This is the hint for thus Moses and Israel will sing. V'hainu shebetuchim anachnu, that we are certain, shenomar shira, that we will sing a song. And then achar kach, and then afterwards you have ashira, I will sing. So he's imagining those first words, Az Yashir Moshe Uvenei Yisrael, thus Moses and Israel will sing. He imagines that Nachshon ben Aminadav had that in his mind as he was walking into the sea. You know, becoming soaked in the water rising up toward his neck, toward his mouth, to the point where he can't breathe. And then he thinks to himself, Az Yashir Moshe, Israel will sing. God will part this sea, and they will sing. And then they did. So this verse, he understands it to mean, to be an example of deep, heartfelt, almost perfect faith in God. As Yashir Moshe, they will sing. And we're going to end with that. It's a beautiful note, because what it teaches us is that this prayer is an expression of a pure, joyful faith in God. Thus, we will sing again. Here, we've been at home for a long time now. I wonder if you're as sick of my office as I am at this point. But you got to have that faith. We will sing again. Az Yashir Moshe B'nai Israel, like Nachshon entering the sea, believing wholeheartedly that it's going to part. I believe the sea is going to part. Do you? That's the question here. When Nachshon ben Aminadav went into the sea, he said those words, says the Kedushat Levi. Az Yashir Moshe, Moses is going to sing. The people of Israel are going to sing, because I know God is going to part this sea. We'll end with that beautiful image. I'll stay for just another moment in case there are any questions, comments, or concerns, and then we'll part ways for this week. I wish you a Shavua Tov. Yocheb, I like that emoji, but I don't know what it refers to. I'll translate your comment. Thank God for Google Translate, Yocheb. Nachshon is an example of trust, kept in mind what the song claimed. How beautiful, Emunah Shlema. Yes, great example of Emunah Shlema, a perfect whole faith. With that, everybody, Shavua Tov. Az Yashir Moshe, we will sing again someday, because the sea is going to split. I know it. And I know deep down you know it too. So with that, Shavua Tov. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye, everybody.